Hey guys, Igor here, and today we're gonna talk about selection. So me and Andre had once again a healthy discussion, and I just wanted to show him and of course everyone else who is willing to watch at least the most common selection that I'm using. So not everything, because there is so much, not all selections are equally useful, let's say like that. So let's start with the most basic one. So one thing that's really important to understand is that how you should look at these things in Houdini, like selection, and then camera, and then handle, is like tools. So Houdini has more similarity with 2D programs than any other 3D program, because if you think about it, if you think about the selection, it's basically a selection tool. So to select things, you obviously need a selection tool. And when you are in selection mode, it's different. It's a little bit different if you are on object level. So on object level, if you're in selection mode, then you are selecting objects, right? So different geometry containers. But if we step inside in any of these containers, we are now selecting primitives, or edges or points. And some selections are the same for every mode, but there are some differences. For example, if you want to select everything in point, edge, or primitive mode, we can simply press N, okay? Like this. Now, for example, if you want to select ring loops or, oh my God, what's the second word? Well, loop selection or ring selection, those are the two main things. We can do it by, again, making sure that we are in selection tool, that selection tool is invoked. And then we can now, again, if you don't want to select everything that's inside the geometry container, just, for example, some parts, well, in some cases, things can be disconnected, okay? So if I double click on this point, I'm selecting everything that's part of this mesh, right? But as you can see here, we didn't select all the points. Maybe it would be better if I use primitives. So it's much more clear to see. So we can see with double clicking, we can also use middle mouse button. We are selecting just the connected object, while everything else is not selected. And that's the difference when pressing N, okay? Where we are selecting absolutely everything that's seen in the viewport. Now, to select a loop, we can just hover over, for example, if you want edge loop, we will just double click on the edge, or even use middle click to select a ring selection. So double click left mouse button on edge, we'll select our edge loop, and then middle mouse button on the edge will select a ring. That's the same in cinema. You have ring selection tool and edge selection tool. So this is the same thing, except everything is contained. So in Houdini, everything is contained under the one tool, which is selection tool. And you can actually check, if you press right mouse button while your selection tool is invoked, you can check all the selections that are possible, okay? And there are plenty of it. And we also have interactive selection and then procedural selection, which I will go through a little bit, because we can also use not only selection tool, but but nodes too, okay, for selecting primitives. So there is also a pet selection. So for example, with pet selection, I would select a primitive, press A, and then you can see this highlight, which is telling me if I would press middle mouse button that I will select this pet, which is highlighted. But if I press again, select one polygon or primitive, hold A, and just click left mouse button, I will just select pet selection like this. So that's the difference between middle mouse button and then left mouse button. Now we can also grow selection with Shift G and then shrink selection. We can also convert selections with, in my case, I set this to be a different shortcut than by default, but we can definitely, as you can see, convert these selections. We can also invert selection with Control I. Okay, we can also fill selection by, well, having something like this. And now let's say I want to select this part. I would just need to hold H, and then we can see that this is highlighted. Press left mouse button, and now this is selected. Let me just see on my list. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. And for the most part, all these selections work for every primitive mode, or for points, edges, and polygons. Exception here is, for example, if I double click on any primitive, it will select everything, right? At least everything that's connected. But for example, we cannot do that in the edge mode. So here I would have to hold H and then select to select everything. Now, let's see what else. The cool thing is that we can also use patterns. Okay, again, we can use patterns interactively. For example, let's say I wanna clean this mesh a little bit. So, or optimize it. Let's say there is too much. Let me actually, I can just subdivide and say, okay, this is a bit too much. So now what I can do, let me go in edge selection or edge mode, and then select one edge. And then let's say I wanna delete every second edge loop. So again, I need to make a pattern. So I make another selection and then Shift P. And again, I need to hold Shift, and then by pressing up on your keyboard, we are selecting every second edge, because that's the pattern we decided or we choose to use. I'm not sure how else to say. But also, if you don't want to do this, like having to click that up arrow on our keyboard 100 times, we can just say Control Shift up, and then you are selecting everything in that direction as far as your geometry goes. We can also go down, and then we can also go left or right. Now, this is not the perfect topology, so that's why you are seeing, I would say, unwanted selection, but maybe I can do something like this. Let's say again, let's try this pattern. So again, let's go up, let's go left, and that can be your selection. Now you can convert, and I don't know, maybe use extrude and make something like this. But what if we want to make things a little bit procedural? So there are a few nodes that we can use to do this. So one node I actually discovered, I don't know how, but let's say I want to delete all of this. Okay. Let's say I want to make now loops from all these selected edges. Well, there is a node called group find path. If we invoke that node or SOP, we have some options with which I'm not going to talk about all the options, but the most common I use is loop or ring starting from elements in base group, which means that now, based on the base group selection, I'm gonna be selecting loops. Now there are few rules that we can use. It really depends on the case that you have presented in front of you, because sometimes your topology is not as maybe ideal for well, this set of rules. So you can play with these settings to get what you want. Fortunately for me, it's kind of impossible to predict every single user case, and also I don't use these tools too often because in my case, at least, I only need like simple selection features. And usually when I would use this node for selecting loops is when I want to optimize my mesh. And for example, we can see here that, this is like, let's say this is just unnecessarily amount of edges here, because for example, if I delete all these, I can now press Q. If I delete all these, like there is almost no change in quality of the mesh, right, in the silhouette, even though there is, but for me, I purposely left this to be like that, because I don't think this kind of pipes can be super perfectly flat or straight. So, but if we need to optimize things, yeah, this is an option, and very fast option. So again, here I can make a pattern, okay, then do that, and then again, let's see, group find path, loops, boom. You see, now I have every second edge loop selected, and now what I can actually do is I can very easily make things a little bit procedural, because now we have this group which is based on my edge selection. But if I, for example, go to, well, selection tool, I can activate my group list from here. Let me just remove this. And now I can see all the selections that I made previously, and they're all in the groups. It's like selection tag in Cinema 4D. Not sure about Max or Maya, sorry about that. So what I can actually do to make things a little bit procedural is make sure that my group list is open, select a group that I want to operate on, and then, for example, I can just delete or dissolve everything. And what happened in the dissolve is I'm able to feed this group field with the group find path tree in this case. So basically what I did, I automatically fed a group instead of the edge selection, for example, that we have here, okay? So instead of having this, which is not procedural at all, I'm having this. So what I can do is I can go back to the group find path, and then just, let's say, I can actually update on the fly. And let's see, I can now do something like this. So I'm just updating that base group, and boom, voila. Now I don't have to delete anything else. I'm just updating a selection and then dissolve, because this group field, because this group is fed to this group field, is just updating the dissolved edges, which is kind of neat. And actually I'm using this pretty often. Not only that, but if I'm working, sometimes if I select something, right, I will let me actually do this. So maybe something like this. Press H, and then to make sure that I'm not losing this selection for, well, any kind of reasons that might present itself, I can just press Alt-G. So that's my shortcut for the group create. And then what this group create node can do is few things. Now we have a base group selection here, and let's say we want to randomize this. So we can actually do that. We just go to keep random, we just enable keep by random chance. And now I can make random selections based on the selection that I made, right? So that's kind of super nice. What's even nicer, for example, let's go here now. If I select, let's say, primitive, and now I want to select everything, okay? But for some odd reason, okay, now I would like to select maybe every second primitive from this selection, or maybe every third. Well, what I can use here is actually group by range. So now, instead of working on everything, I'm again working on this base group, which means that I can go here in my range filter and then decide how I want my selection to look, which is pretty powerful, and it's procedural, right? So plenty of ways, and that's not all. So again, if you're curious what kind of selection you can do, just make sure that you're in selection tool and then press right mouse button and you have everything here. What I also really like is this, let me see, select and side polygons. So I set all of these to be on my shortcuts, which is Shift 3 for triangle selection, which, it makes sense, three edges triangle, right? And then I have quads, which is set to Shift 4. Again, logic is 4 edges. Yeah, that's a quad. And then 5-sided or greater, which is Shift 5. Again, 5-sided or greater. Kind of very logical and actually very easy to memorize, right? Because it makes sense. So what I can do here, so I mean, this is all quads, pretty much. So let me just try and make a little bit of chaos here. So let's use divide. Okay. Let's see. Maybe I just brickify, make some mess. Oops. See. Let's see. Okay. So now we have this kind of mesh, and now let's say I wanna know where are all the triangles, right? So I can actually use Shift 3. Okay, cool. I have that many triangles, and to actually see the number, let me just enable selection only. Okay, and now I can see here down how many triangles I have. So it's always about selecting things and then seeing here how many primitives are selected. That goes for points and edges too. And if I press Shift 4, I'm getting all the quads. And then if I'm pressing Shift 5, I'm getting 5-sided polygons or more. So pretty dope. And all of this can also be done procedural with group expression, which I don't use often, but there is definitely, as you can see here, the same thing that you can do. So this would be like procedural way. The things with the shortcut, it's not procedural, it's more like interactive. And on top of that, yeah, you have a bit more things, but most of these things are covered inside of the group create node. So another thing to point out, even though I'm not going to show absolutely everything, but rather just point out where to look, is this top bar. So, okay, so every tool that you are using has some options in the toolbar, just like for any 2D program, right? Okay, maybe not any, but for example, I'm using Affinity, and it's the same logic. On the left, I have my tools, like selection tool, and then on this top bar, I have some settings that I can alter. So that goes same with Houdini. And another thing that you can actually go and see, or let's say to check the features, is inside here. So you can choose to only be able to select 3D connected geometry, or UV connected geometry, or geometry groups, or for example, when you can see, you can even select by the name attribute. Then on top of that, you can also select by the angle. So if I am, so by the way, this is the group list, okay? Or you can find it here. But I have bind it to Alt-4, so I don't have to reach. Again, I have a guide, guys. All of these shortcuts that I managed to set up, you're gonna see through the guide. But here you can see now when I'm hovering over these primitives, polygons, you can see that I'm highlighting a selection that I will make based on this spread angle. If I make this smaller, let's see, you see, hovering over certain parts will not allow to for everything to be selected. Now, and this is based on the angle, right? Now, I'm not using this too much, so I'm not really like expert on how this exactly works, but you see my point. So, as you can see, guys, there is plenty of ways to select things in Houdini, interactively or through the nodes. I'm using both ways, but like I said, not all selections are equally useful. And only selection type that I am missing is symmetrical selection. Everything else, pretty much you can do it either interactively or through nodes. I really don't know which kind of selection you cannot do or which kind of selection other DCC softwares have that Houdini doesn't have, except symmetrical selection. For example, in C4D, I know that selecting things is not even close, like not even close to Houdini. And that's a fact. Fortunately, I don't know anything about Maya in that regard or 3ds Max, but I would assume either it's the same, because what I see like with some of the tools is there is a lot of similarity with 3ds Max, with Maya. You can really clearly see that that side effects or SESI is taking or looking at Maya and 3ds Max. I think mostly Maya. So hopefully this was helpful. Again, I could talk, I guess, few hours about this topic, but what I could recommend, latest tutorial from Hip Flask. Unfortunately, I couldn't afford right now to buy a tutorial, but as far as I know, his latest tutorial is all about selection and selecting things. And this guy has like 15 years of experience, so if you really want to know about selection and everything about selections, go check his tutorials. I had all previously tutorials that he made, and I can only say the great things about them. I really learned a lot. So I can only imagine that there are still some things that I don't know in terms of how we can select things. So as soon as I'm able to buy the tutorial, I will buy it, and I'm really curious to see what I miss, because I'm sure this guy has something in his sleeves that we all don't know. So go and check if you need more than this, but definitely whenever you're using tools, just look at the toolbar or press right mouse button and check what's available. Like I said, there is so much. Yeah, actually, one nice thing to mention too, for example, let me see. By the way, I'm still working on this model, but okay, let me create new scene. Okay, sorry about this. But for example, what we can also do is, let's say we have a hole like this, and we want to, or even more. Let me put some more holes around here. that. Or, you know, I can actually use grow. Let's say we want to close all these, well, holes. The neat thing is, well, you can actually do it just by selecting everything and then fill the gaps. It should work, yeah. And boom, that's it. But in some cases, what's, I believe, good to know is that we can actually select boundaries in 2 ways. So one way is, again, select everything and then Shift B. Now we just selected these boundaries and then we can just fill these holes. Boom, that's it. Now, why we need to select first and then to be able to get these boundary selections is, if we have 2 objects, actually, you know what? Let me do this. You see, this is now one simple example how in Houdini things work differently, where I didn't have to undo, I just delete one sub and I get the result that I wanted. But let me continue about this boundary selection. So why I need to, this is actually what I realized, why I need to select like everything to be able to get, well, selection like this is because in cases when you have like 2 separate objects, and let's say you just wanna make a boundary selection on one of these objects, that's why then you need to select everything. Because otherwise, if you select everything like this and then Shift B, well, you are selecting all the boundary edges. So imagine if you have like more of these separate objects and you just want to make a boundary selection on one of them. This is what you do. You just select everything on that thing, on that object, and then use Shift B. Now you can also use this mode in primitive, but it looks a bit different, and also point mode. So yeah, plenty of ways to select things. I'm sure I didn't mention everything. That was not the point. Just most common one that I use. And hopefully, guys, that help a bit. I strongly suggest that you go and practice this a little bit if you want to master the selection, and just, you know, explore, and you will see that there are plenty of options for you to select certain patterns or certain objects or whatever you might need. I'm really accept symmetrical selection. I didn't find a case where I couldn't select anything. And I even have some techniques that I'm using when I'm modeling. It's hard to explain. You will see that in modeling videos. But all in all, hopefully this was helpful, guys. And I think for the next topic, as this was for Andre again, I will tackle how I use booleans and quadrimesher, because Bob was curious why am I using booleans when everyone thinks that that's not everyone, just those people that I guess don't know much. What they think that having n-gons is bad. Yes, yes, but it really depends what you're doing. And in most cases, you're not gonna leave everything to be n-gons. But again, that's topic for another video. Hopefully this was helpful, guys, and see you in the next video. If you have questions, it's good. Please comment, ask, because that gives me idea like what to record next, beside just these mini projects that I usually do. So yeah, until the next time, guys, take care, stay safe, and see you around.